can do that just like we used to do in Microsoft Excel. Preview and print, I guess I can print the contents of a table if I wanted a physical copy of that. That's going to work just like you would expect it to. I've already got my table open. If I go to File, Print, I can choose Print, and then it will print the contents of this table to my printer. Or if I want to see what I'm going to print, I can go to Print, and then Print Preview, and you can see that it's going to print a copy of my table. I can import and link data from other applications to Access. So if I want to import an Excel worksheet, this is a good way for you to pull in external data into your database if you already have an established spreadsheet or some other data source that you want to bring in to a database structure. So I'm just going to go over to my database, and I'm going to go to the External Data tab, and then you can see there's an item here that says Import Excel Spreadsheet. It shows a picture of the Excel icon with an arrow pointing to my database, which tells me it's going to bring the data into my database. If I click on that, I'm going to get a dialog box. And I have several options here. I could import it into a new table, I could add it to an existing table, or I could link to the data source, which means it's a live link between the two products. But in this case, I'm going to import the source data into a new table in the current database. And I need to browse to choose my file that I want to utilize. I'm just going to grab this item here under week 9. And then I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to take a look at that data set and give me all of the different pieces of information in that data set. And then I can hit Next. And I want to make sure that this, in this case, says first row contains column headings, because each one of those column headings will be established as the field name in my new table. I can hit Next. I can next through this. I will choose my own primary key just because, in this case, I don't want to use theirs, or I could choose no primary key. This data I have here doesn't really lend itself to a primary key, so I'm just going to leave it off. I'm going to hit Next. It's going to give me a suggested table name. I'll leave it as that and hit Finish. And if I want, I can save the import steps. That's something you would do if you want to repeatedly pull data from that data source. In this case, I'm just doing a one-off, so I'm not going to save the import steps. I hit Close, and you can see I have a brand new table in my database called Order List that has data from one of the tabs in my spreadsheet that I was using as a source of data. So now I have all of this information immediately pulled into my Access database. This is showing a visual of that. Modifying a table in Design View. I think we've pretty much gone over this. I can right-click on this and show it in Design View. This is the new table I just imported, and as I've shown you before, I can edit all kinds of different pieces of information here, data types, field names, as well as properties down here in the bottom part, and we'll get into some of these other properties in more detail later. I can use simple queries with my data using the Simple Query Wizard, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I've got my table. I'm just going to go back to Datasheet View, and I'm going to go to my Create tab, and I'm going to create a query using the Query Wizard. So I'm going to choose Query Wizard, and I'm going to create a Simple Query Wizard, the first option that's already selected. Hit OK. And it's just going to say, what table do I want to do my query on? And I'll just do it on the order list table that I've been messing around with. And you can see this is all of the items or the fields that are in that table. And maybe I just want to see customer name and order total in my simple query. I can select those two items. I did it by double-clicking on them. I could also highlight them and use the single arrow to move a single item over one way or the other. I can also do the double arrow if I say, just give me everything on the table. But in this case, I don't want that, so I'm going to move all those back to the left I'm just going to say customer name, order total, and I can hit next. And I can either show detail or I can show a summary. I hit next. It's going to name the query. I could call this whatever I wanted, and I'll just go ahead and view it and hit finish. And I'm going to have to close my table that I was working on because it won't let me do it otherwise. And then I'm going to view my query. And you can see now I've got my simple query has brought back 2 of the columns in my table, customer name and order total, just like I asked it to. So it lets me just look at specific parts of my data that I want to see. I can use criterion in my query. So I'm going to go ahead and add some criteria to the query that you just watched me make. So I'm going to go over to my database. And you can see now that I've created that query, I have it on the left here. I've already opened it here. But if I wanted to open this in Design View, I would just right-click on it here and go into Design View. And this is the view that we'll get. We're going to see other things that come up in this kind of a view. But here you can see the only thing in my query is my order list. And then I've got items going across the bottom, which are the 2 items I chose to include in my query. Now, if I want to add criteria, I can go down to the column that I want to put the criteria on. And criteria is essentially a filtering activity. I can go down to the column that I want to filter on under criteria. And let's say I want to filter for a specific I need to look at my list to see. Maybe I only want to see Ansel Adams in my results instead of seeing Ansel and Bradley. I'll go back over to my query, and in my criteria, I will just say, just give me Ansel Adams. When I click away from that field, you can see it puts quotes around it because it's a text criteria. And now I've got my query the way I want it. I want to go ahead and view it in Datasheet View and run it, and I get nothing. Turned out I got nothing because Ansel Adams wasn't in my query result, so I need to choose windy weathers instead. So I'll go back to Datasheet View, and this time I'll put my criteria of windy weathers in, and now I will run it, and it will only return customer name windy weathers. I can create forms. What a form is a way for you to have a simplified view to add or edit data in your tables without having to look in Datasheet View or Design View. It's just a more user-friendly view of your data. So I'm going to create a form. So I'm back over on my database, and I'm going to go to the Create tab, and I'm going to create a form. And I'm going to save my query. That is not how I wanted that to happen. Let me close this. I want to do it off of my order list. So I'm going to select my order list table, and I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to go to Create a Form. And this time I will get a form that is based on my order list table. And you can see the first item here is Ansel Adams. If I go from my order list, you can see the first item here is Ansel Adams. It's just showing this table. It's showing a single record in a view that is more consumable by a user. So if I wanted to edit some part of this, I could. Or if I wanted to change to a different record, I can go through my different records. So if I go down here at the bottom, you can see I'm on record 1 of 12, and I've got these arrows that I can use. So if I hit this arrow, you're going to see the data is changing because I'm going to different records in my table. And then if I want to edit those records, I can. I just have to make sure that I have saved my form before it lets me start editing data using my form. So if I realize this was a pen instead of a pencil, I can change that, and now that change has been committed to my table. So it's just a different view that lets me edit data within my table. I can create reports reports off of my data. A report is just a consumable view of the information in your table. It would be something that's non-editable. It's just something that you can output to hand to somebody that wants to see what's going on in the data. So I'm going to create a report. So I'm going to first click on my order list because I'm going to create my report off of my order list. And again, I'm going to go to the Create tab, and I'm going to choose Report right here. And it's going to give me a simple report. And I can edit this as I want to, but basically this is just another view of my data. It automatically throws some totals in for me that it thinks I want. In this case, there's really only one total because it's the order total. It's just taking that column and totaling it up for me. Here are some of the edits we can make. So we can modify report column headings and resize the columns if we want to. So right now I am just in view mode. If I hit this pull down here, I can choose layout view, which will let me edit some of the stuff within my my report here. So obviously this column is wider than it needs to be, so I can just grab and shorten up these columns. Just by grabbing them on the right of one of the items, I have the whole column selected. And then I can grab and shorten it up. Maybe I don't want customer name to be customer name. I want to change it to consumer name. Maybe that makes more sense to whoever is reading my report. I can just very quickly change that and just note that I have not changed my table. I have just changed my report. So my table is still going to be called customer name, but whoever looks at my report is going to see it as a consumer name. I can add totals to the report. You saw that it already had that total there, but if I want to, maybe I wanted to total item total. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but in this case, maybe I want to add a total. To do that, I first have to move, right now I'm in layout view, I actually have to move to design view to add a total there. So again, down at my view options here, I go to design view. And this is, I mean, it's not pretty to look at, but it is a design view of my report. And now that I'm in design view, I can add a total to my item total. So I'm going to click on item total. And then under Report Design Tools, Design tab, I have this option called Totals. It's that summation sign that we saw in Excel when we were doing that earlier. I go in the Totals here, and I can say Sum, and you can see that it adds a total at the end of my report. And then if I go to View, Report View, you can see that now I have a total listed down here at the bottom of my report. I can change database properties if I want. That's the same thing we did in Microsoft Excel. So if I go to File and go to this view, I can view and edit my database properties, and there's a list of properties here that I can, if I feel like I want to add them in, I can. Again, this helps you find your database or establish different information about it when you're accessing it from your Windows view. I can back up my database. Sometimes with databases, especially if you get a larger database, regular backups are a necessity just to avoid any kind of database corruption, because there are times when you get in a situation where something is so messed up that you are going to have a hard time being able to recover it. So to make a backup of my database, I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Save As. And then I'm going to leave it on Save Database As, and I have this option here called Backup Database. I'll double click on that. I already had a table open, so I need to save it, or a report open, so I have to save it. And now it's going to let me do a backup. And you can see what it essentially doing is just a Save As but it is just saving the database name and appending the date to it. So I know that this backup was done on this date. As I do regular backups, then I would have a different date, so then I can always go back in history and get to a different version of my database if I have corruption or an issue of some sort. Now I have saved my database off, so I don't have to worry about anything getting broken going forward because I have that backup made. Compacting and repairing a database. This is something that you would periodically want to do, again, as you get a very large database. Compacting and repairing just removes junk from your database, extra stuff that maybe you had something established in a table and you've removed it. Well, that reference to it is still there, things like that. So it keeps your database from slowing down because it's getting unwieldy. It's just a good regular tool if you're keeping a long-term database to periodically do compact and repair. So I can do that on this database. It's kind of pointless on this database because it's brand new and there's very little in it. But if I wanted to do it, I can go to my File menu and I can do Compact and Repair Database. And there you go. I have done a compact and repair on my database. I can also close my database, just like I can anything else. I can rename my database, I can delete tables, or rename objects in my database. I think these are things that we all understand we can do in these tools, being able to edit things after they've already been created. And as far as database design, this is something that in some ways is an art. As you get more comfortable with creating databases, you get better at these things. But being able to, when you're sitting down to create a new database, thinking about the things that you're going to need, even just writing it down on a napkin or a piece of paper, like what am I going to require in my database? And you can determine what tables you need and what the primary key should be, what other fields do you really want in those different tables, the relationships between the tables, which is something we'll be getting into in subsequent weeks, and making sure you have the right database types, and dealing with redundancy, because if you're putting the same piece of data in over and over again, that might be a design issue where perhaps another table is more appropriate than continuing to repeatedly type the same piece of information in. That's all I have for this lesson. I know there's quite a bit here, but we really need to get ourselves moving on Microsoft Access because we have several more things that we need to do that are a little more advanced, so everybody needs to have this baseline so we can get started. Thanks.